Before the world knew him as Ludacris, the wild, witty, platinum-selling Southern icon, he was just Christopher Bridges, a kid from Champaign, Illinois, who learned early that the loudest voice in the room doesn't have to scream. In Atlanta, hip-hop wasn't just music, it was becoming an industry. And for a teenager with a sharp mind and sharper tongue, that meant opportunity. Luda wasn't born into rap royalty, he built his way into it, piece by piece, job by job. From answering phones at the local radio station to becoming DJ Chris Lover Lover, his voice was already in people's ears long before his name was in their playlist. But behind the jokes and charisma, there was a dream: to make Atlanta's sound echo nationwide. What began as a 20,000 gamble and a homemade CD would explode into a platinum career. He wasn't just another rapper, he was a character, a showman, and the businessman who turned personality into empire. During this time, which was the late 90s and early 2000s, Atlanta and the South in general was heating up in the rap scene. Outkast released 2 monster albums with Aquemini and Staconia. No Limit Records and Master P were dropping multiple albums in a year, and Juvenile dropped 400 Degrees, which already reached multi-platinum status, and Cash Money Records was right behind them. In the new millennium, Atlanta had another star brewing, ready to take the industry by storm. This is the story of the rise of Ludacris, how a radio kid flipped the mic, rewrote the rules, and brought Atlanta to the world stage. Christopher Brian Bridges, better known as Ludacris, was born on September 11th, 1977, in Champaign, Illinois. Luda was born into a working-class family that valued education, faith, and self-expression. From an early age, he was surrounded by music. His father, Wayne Bridges, exposed him to jazz and R&B, while his mother, Roberta Shields, emphasized discipline and academics. It's also confirmed that Chris is actually related to Richard Pryor as well. They're known as second cousins once removed, and that comes from Chris's mother's side of the family, who was originally from Peoria, Illinois, just like Richard Pryor. When Chris was born, his parents were still in college, and because of this, he will find himself at house jams and parties, hearing different kinds of music. Chris will say in an interview that they were always jamming to old school stuff like Frankie Beverly and Maze, Cameo, all kinds of music. They used to take me to college parties and let me get out in the middle of the floor and dance for all the other students. Those two worlds, rhythm and structure, will later define how he moved later on. When Chris was 9, he wrote his first rap. At age 12, he joined a Chicago-based hip-hop group called the Loudmouth Hooligans and began rapping with them before moving to Atlanta. As a member of this group, he honed his rhyming and performing abilities. Another member of the group was rapper 4IZE, who later contributed to some of Ludacris' albums. He eventually moved to Oak Park as a teenager, and by high school, he was already performing at a local talent shows and writing verses for fun. But even then, his delivery stood out. He was animated, confident, and full of humor. After attending Oak Park River Forest High School in 9th grade, Bridges moved to Centralville, Virginia, and attended Centralville High School for 1 year. His family eventually moved to Atlanta, Georgia, a city that was beginning to shape its own musical identity. In the early 90s, Atlanta wasn't yet a hip-hop powerhouse we know today, but the seeds were being planted, with acts like Goody Mob, Outkast, and TLC. And those groups were redefining what Southern music could sound like. He attended Banneker High School, where he balanced classes with side hustles and freestyle sessions. He understood that talent alone wasn't enough. You had to sell it. After graduating in 1995, he took that same job to Georgia State University, where he majored in music management from 1998 to 1999, studying the business behind the music while quietly planning his own come-up. Atlanta in the mid-90s was a radio-driven city. If you could get your song on air, even once, you could change your whole life. That's where Chris found his next opportunity, not as a rapper, but as a radio intern. He started at Atlanta's Hot 97.5, the city's new hip-hop and R&B station, doing whatever needed to be done. From running errands to organizing records, he learned how the industry worked from the inside out. Eventually, his personality got him on air, and the station gave him a nickname that would become legend: DJ Chris Lover Lover. That's where the world first heard his voice: confident, quick, and comedic. Every shift on the mic was a rehearsal for the artist he'd soon become later on. From Champaign to Atlanta, the boy who once scribbled rhymes in a notebook had now found the stage, even if it was behind a radio mic. But what he didn't know was that this job would become the launchpad for something much bigger. He began as an intern, running errands, queuing records, watching, listening, and absorbing everything around him. Soon, his voice became part of the station's personality. His alter ego, Chris Lover Lover, was smooth, loud, and full of jokes, a natural entertainer who kept listeners locked in between songs. And behind the mic, he was studying how hits worked, what people requested, what DJs played twice, and how a single song could move a crowd. Working at the station also gave him access to the lifeblood of Atlanta's hip-hop scene. He met producers, artists, label reps, anyone who passed through the studio doors. Among those early connections were DJs and up-and-coming beatmakers who would shape his early sound. But one of his biggest breaks came from an unexpected guest, producer Timbaland. When Timbaland visited the station, Chris Lover seized the moment. He introduced himself, made his pitch, and soon after recorded a guest verse for Timbaland's 1998 album, Tim's Bio, Live from the Basement. His first official appearance on a major record, the song Fat Rabbit became a cult favorite, especially overseas. It was fast, witty, and brimming with personality, the same traits that would soon define his solo career. Without realizing it, Chris had planted the first seed of what would become his stage name, Ludacris. Still, radio didn't pay much. Between shifts, Chris worked part-time jobs, hosting clubs, saved money, and spent late nights in small studio recording demos. He didn't have a label, but he had something much more valuable: insider knowledge on how to get heard. Every night after his radio show, he'll hit the streets with his own tracks, handing out CDs, freestyling at clubs, and convincing DJs to spin his songs. In a city dominated by Outkast and Goody Mob, that took guts. He started building a name locally, not as Chris Lover, but as Ludacris, a name that fit the larger-than-life personality he had been honing on the airwaves. The word itself meant absurd, wild, over the top. It was everything his style embodied. When it came to coming up with Ludacris, this was what Chris had to say: "The nickname is something I made up. I have kind of a split personality. Part of me is calm, cool, and collected, while the other side is just beyond crazy. My lyrics are Ludacris, my live shows are Ludacris like off the chain crazy." By 1998, Ludacris was a fixture in Atlanta's underground scene. His tapes were circulating, his buzz was growing, and he had one clear mission: to take everything he had learned behind the radio mic and use it to make himself a star. In a world where most rappers waited for a label to find them, Ludacris was already building his own. All he needed now was a product to sell. And that's where his radio hustle turned into an empire, armed with $20,000 of his own money and a dream too big for just one city. Ludacris went independent. Ludacris took every dollar he saved from his radio job and hosting clubs, which was around $20,000, and invested it into his own music. No investors, no label, just a self-belief strong enough to fill the gap between dreams and reality. He was paying for all his recording, mixing, and mastering. He booked sessions, pressed CDs, and handled his own marketing. Ludacris used this technique to promote his song, What's Your Fantasy. He used his connections from the radio station to get it played on other stations across the country. The result of that gamble was Incognito, his independently released debut album. Recorded across small studios and mixed by local engineers, Incognito was more than just a collection of songs. It was proof of concept. It showed that Ludacris wasn't waiting for a label blessing. He was already acting like one. On Incognito, Ludacris introduced the world to his alter ego in full form. Funny, fearless, and slick with wordplay. He didn't sound like anyone else coming out of Atlanta. Many of the songs that would later define his early career was born here. What's Your Fantasy, his breakout record, was originally released on Incognito. The track's energy, equal parts humor, sex, and swagger made it impossible to ignore. Word of mouth spread fast. DJs passed the record around, local stations began giving it light spins, and by late 1999, Incognito was moving real numbers, selling around 50,000 copies independently, all out of the trunk and through mom and pop stores. Those numbers were unheard of for an indie label in that era. And remember, this was before streaming. He was physically selling those CDs hand to hand. That's pure grind. And as the buzz grew, major labels started paying attention. The breakout song from Incognito was What's Your Fantasy, which got over 500 spins a week on radio, which later became a hit in some southern markets, which helped the album move 30,000 units in just over 3 months alone. The South was suddenly hot property, and Ludacris' sound was exactly what they were missing: a mix of charisma, commercial appeal, and street hustle. One executive in particular saw the vision: Shaka Zulu. Shaka Zulu, a respected industry figure in Atlanta and a former radio promotions director, became Ludacris' manager. Together, they brought Disturbing the Peace to life. Disturbing the Peace was a record label founded in 1998 by Ludacris, Shaka Zulu, and Jeff Dixon, who was the brother of Shaka Zulu. The label was of course independent and was an outlet that scouted for southern artists. Incognito was hot in the streets, so it caught the attention of major labels, which included Def Jam himself and Scarface, who was president of the label. After talks with several labels, Luda ultimately decided to sign a lucrative deal with Def Jam South. They negotiated a distribution deal with Def Jam South, which was basically a brand new branch of Def Jam Records designated to spotlight southern artists. With Def Jam South on board, Incognito was repackaged, remastered, and re-released under a new title, Back for the First Time. It was the same music, but with the machine behind it. The gamble had paid off. Ludacris went from handing out CDs in a parking lot to signing a major deal. What made Ludacris different though was that he already proved he could move units. He didn't come to Def Jam asking for help. He came showing results. That's why the deal made sense. They were plugging into a new wave that already existed. In a sense, Incognito wasn't just an album, it was a blueprint. It showed how an artist could build an empire from scratch using radio connections, self-marketing, and sheer confidence. It was the beginning of a southern movement that would change hip-hop forever. By the end of 2000, Ludacris was no longer an underground act. He was a certified major label artist with a gold plaque on the way, and Atlanta was about to crown another king. The independent gamble had worked, but now the real test had begun. Could he conquer the national stage? When Back for the First Time dropped on October 17, 2000, it debuted at number 4 on the US Billboard 200 and at number 2 on the R&B Hip Hop Albums chart, selling 133,000 copies in the first week of release. The album will later go triple platinum on May 7, 2002. Back for the First Time was a reintroduction of everything Ludacris had built on the streets of Atlanta, now polished with Def Jam muscle behind it. The album opened up with swagger, humor, and hard-hitting beats courtesy of producers like Bangladesh, Organized Noise, and the Neptunes. It was southern, but it wasn't boxed in. Ludacris' delivery was razor sharp and theatrical, like he was born to entertain. What's a Fantasy exploded onto the charts, peaking at number 21 on the Billboard's Hot 100 and at number 19 on the official singles chart Top 100. It was raunchy, playful, and perfectly timed for the new millennium, a record that blurred the lines between comedy and confidence. It was also included in the soundtrack album of the movie How High in 2001, and by 2008, the song will go on to be ranked at number 58 on VH1 100 Greatest Hip Hop Songs of All Time. Luda brought personality back to rap. He wasn't trying to be a gangster or a philosopher. He was pure entertainment. There's also an official remix to What's a Fantasy that features Shawnna, Trina, and Foxy Brown. And yeah, all of their verses were explicit, and you can't really be mad at that because that's the whole vibe and energy of the song in general. The song was also produced by Chandra Lee Crawford, better known as Bangladesh, who got his name for his unique production ability and not from the country. He was an in-house producer for Ludacris and did most of the production for Back for the First Time, producing 6 songs on the album. He began working with Luda through a mutual friend when he was a junior in high school. He brought a beat machine and was making beats in his own basement. He was working on a project, and the beat for What's Your Fantasy was the last beat for that project. After he made the beat, he felt something incredible and special inside of him. But before he even made the beat to What's Your Fantasy, he played a cassette tape that had 4 beats on it for Luda in his car. Luda asked for the tape, and a few days later, that is when Bangladesh would make the beat to What's Your Fantasy in his own basement. I know I just backtracked, so forgive me. I had to give a little context. So anyways, Bangladesh called Luda's house, and Luda picked up asking what Bang had for him. So when Luda picked up, Bang already had the beat for What's Your Fantasy playing in the background, and Ludacris was already demanding for Bangladesh to come over his house with all of his equipment, and that was the first time Bangladesh was ever invited to Ludacris' house. The rest is history. So shout out to Bangladesh, he is a legend. Now anyways, Luda's next single, Southern Hospitality, produced by the Neptunes, took things up a notch. The single debuted at number 86 on the Billboard's Hot 100 and peaked at number 23 on March 24th. The beat was futuristic, but the energy was 100% Atlanta. The video, directed by Jeremy Rail, became an MTV staple, complete with lowriders, flames, and that unforgettable charisma. In an interview with GQ, Ludacris stated that he had eaten soon before hanging upside down for the music video and vomited soon after recording the scene. Also, Southern Hospitality was not meant to be a hit, and it was a last-minute addition to the album. Ludacris did not think that the song was going to be a hit like it did. During an interview with All the Smoke, Ludacris spoke about his collaboration with the Neptunes and how Southern Hospitality came to be. So Incognito was my independent album, and when we were signed to Def Jam, we repackaged it and added 3 songs to it. Taking 3 songs off it, repackaged for the world instead of being sold out of my trunk, and Southern Hospitality was one of those records actually. If anybody could give you a hit at the last minute, it's Pharrell, Chad, and the Neptunes. He throws on the beat and I'm vibing to it. I'm thinking it's cool. I'm not like thinking this is a hit. I did not know that it was a hit that it became. With Back for the First Time, Ludacris went platinum, selling over 3 million copies worldwide. He wasn't just representing Atlanta anymore. He was representing the South on a global stage. Nonetheless, Ludacris' brand was unmistakable, creative, and eye-catching videos, witty bars, and a sense of humor that cut through the tough exterior in the hip-hop industry at that time. But let's not forget, just a couple weeks after Back for the First Time was released, Outkast released Stankonia. And yeah, we already know how much of that album dominated the radio and the South in general. Plus, Nelly released Country Grammar, which was blowing up, and Eminem released the Marshall Mathers LP, which sold over 1 million copies the first week of release, and Dr. Dre 2001 album was still getting played everywhere on the radio and in the clubs. So yeah, the competition was very high when Luda came on the scene. Now, most artists are known for dropping great projects, but then becoming lackluster right after. But that wasn't the case for Luda. Luda was a people's rapper, funny, confident, and quick with the bars. But the thing is, he could really rap. That's what made him special. Then came Word of Mouth in 2001, an even bigger statement. If Back for the First Time announced him, Word of Mouth solidified him in the rap game. Word of Mouth officially released on November 27, 2001. Debuted at number 3 on the US Billboard 200 and at number 1 on the top R&B hip-hop albums chart, selling over 281,000 copies in its first week of release, and by November 30th, 2022, the album would be 4 times platinum. Tracks like Roll Out, My Business, Saturday, Oh Oh, and Move Bitch became instant anthems. His videos became spectacles, cartoonish, surreal, and larger than life. From giant heads to wild animations, Ludacris used humor and imagination like weapons. He wasn't following trends, he was rewriting how the rap star could look and sound. Then came Area Codes, which released on July 3rd, 2001. It was collaboration with Nate Dogg that turned a phrase into a cultural catchphrase. Suddenly, Ludacris was everywhere. Radio, music videos, collaborations, and features. The song was originally released on the soundtrack to Rush Hour 2. The song was inspired and created from Ludacris' personal experience traveling and getting phone numbers from women all around the country in different cities. While riding in a limo, Luda and his crew would call out random area codes to see who could remember which city corresponds with which one. Say if it's 718, it responds with New Jersey and such and such. In an interview with GQ, Luda talks about how the song Area Codes came about. So Area Codes came about in such an organic way. This is my first time traveling the world, going from city to city, and definitely picking up numbers and hollering at women in every single city. So I had this mental Rolodex. No matter where I was at, I know if I was in Jersey, I was like 201. If I'm in New York, 718. I would have all these different numbers. We were sitting in a limo one day, the whole crew, and somebody was like, what's 305? And we was like, nigga, that's Miami. That's one of your hoes in Miami. Somebody else would ring and it would be, oh, it's 813. Oh man, that's Tampa. You gotta know that. It was almost like this extreme game that we would play because we would never record their names. We just got the phone numbers, so you would have to remember what city every area code came to, so that record was 100% organic. Oh yeah, Area Codes was a huge song, but Word of Mouth was actually a big album as well. Word of Mouth also was nominated for a Grammy for Best Rap Album at the 45th Annual Grammy Awards, but unfortunately he lost to Eminem. Ludacris also took part in the second edition of Anger Management Tour in the summer of 2002, which was headlined by Eminem himself. Alongside his own success, Ludacris built Disturbing the Peace into a real movement. Artists like Shawnna, I-20, and Field Mob were coming up under his wing. On September 10th, 2002, they released a compilation album called Golden Grain. The album debuted at number 6 on the Billboard 200 and sold 95,000 copies in its first week of release. And in that same year, Chingy was signed to DTP as well. Chingy got signed to DTP after Ludacris and Chaka Zulu were introduced to him, and they decided to sign him out of nowhere. Chingy would end up releasing his debut album Jackpot on July 15, 2003, but it released under Capitol Records after Def Jam failed to secure a distribution deal. Jackpot will go on to be a commercially successful album with songs like Right There, Holiday Inn, and One Call Away featuring Jason Weaver. The album sold 157,000 copies the first week and debuted at number 2 on the US Billboard 200. By 2002, Ludacris was untouchable. His album went triple platinum, his features were everywhere. He featured on the Jermaine Dupri's Welcome to Atlanta that peaked at number 35 on the Billboard's Hot 100. He featured on Bia Bia with Lil Jon and the East Side Boys. And just before 2002 ended, he featured on Gospel Folks by Missy Elliott, which peaked at number 8 on the Hot 100. And let's not forget, for my New Yorkers out there, if you was listening to Nas around 2002, you already know Ludacris featured on Nas's Made You Look remix alongside Jadakiss. And yeah, both Jadakiss and Ludacris did their thing on a remix and the song itself. He even made the Too Fast, Too Furious soundtrack with Act the Fool, expanding his brand beyond rap. Ludacris' success represented a new era, one where Southern artists didn't need to sound like New York or Los Angeles. He was proof that Atlanta had its own identity, its own voice. Now, like I said before, the early 2000s was heavily competitive. Even Nelly said himself. Ludacris' competition was Nelly, Eminem, Ja Rule, 50 Cent, DMX, and Jay-Z. all ruled the charts. Yet, Ludacris managed to carve out his own lane through pure personality. Nobody could match his charisma. On October 7, 2003, Ludacris released Chicken and Beer. It debuted at number 1 on the US Billboard 200 and sold 429,000 copies in its first week of release. And the single Stand Up, produced by Kanye West, became his first number 1 hit on the Billboard's Hot 100. Stand Up stood at the number 1 spot for 28 weeks straight and topped the R&B hip-hop singles chart for 5 weeks. The song also received a Grammy nomination for Best Rap Solo Performance at the 46th Annual Grammy Awards. The song was also placed in the soundtrack for the movie You Got Served. The video, as wild as ever, reflected everything he stood for: humor, energy, and showmanship. But beneath the fun, there was strategy. Ludacris knew how to make hits that appealed to every audience all around the world. Club records, street anthems, and radio singles all at once. Luda had officially gone from radio intern to rap superstar. Now, unlike Back for the First Time and Word of Mouth, Chicken and Beer was a smash hit all across the globe, like Germany and the United Kingdom. And by 2004, Ludacris was at his absolute peak. Word of Mouth and Chicken and Beer made him a household name. He conquered radio, TV, and hip-hop culture itself. But what made his run remarkable wasn't his success, it was sustainability. Every superstar reaches that point when fame becomes familiar and the next challenge isn't getting on. It's about staying there. He featured on one of the hottest albums that dropped that year, Confessions by Usher. Or should I say he featured on Yeah by Usher. Yeah was released on January 10th, 2004, and it stood at the top of the Billboard's Hot 100 for 12 consecutive weeks before being replaced by Usher's next single, Burn. But later on, Yeah would go on to be 13 times platinum. That is insane. The way Ludacris was able to get on Yeah was because Usher's label, Arista, wanted a single that had more mainstream appeal. Usher called in Lil Jon to come in and do the production, which was crunk, which was what Lil Jon was known for. Then they created the song and added Ludacris to the mix, and boom, Yeah was made. When Red Light District came out and dropped on December 7, 2004, Ludacris was operating at full power. The album's title was a nod to Amsterdam's infamous district, a metaphor for freedom, indulgence, and doing whatever the hell you wanted to do. And that's exactly what Ludacris embodied. The album debuted at number 1 on the US Billboard 200 and sold 322,000 copies in its first week of release and will be eventually double platinum on September 29, 2005. The record came packaged with high-octane production from the Neptunes, DJ Nasty, and LVM, and even a young Kanye West. But what stood out most ways was Ludacris' evolution. His delivery had grown sharper, his subject matter was more layered, and his control over tone was more refined. Get Back, which was the lead single, hit like a bomb. It was aggressive, comedic, and cinematic all at once, a pure adrenaline rush. The video, directed by Spike Jonze, was one of the most outrageous of the era. Ludacris' humor had turned into art, blending animation, satire, and swagger into something unforgettable. Luda treated every video like a movie. That's why fans loved him. He made rap fun again. But his biggest hit from the album came with a twist. Number 1 spot, sampling the Austin Powers theme, it was a tongue-in-cheek anthem that declared exactly where Ludacris stood, on top. But what really separated Ludacris during this era was his versatility. He could jump on a feature and steal the show. Whether it was Missy Elliott's 1 Minute Man, Usher's Yeah, or even Nas's Made You Look remix, he had the rare gift. A voice that could cut through any beat and in any setting. His shows became legendary, pure entertainment, full of energy, humorous, and connection. Every concert felt like a celebration of the South's arrival. Atlanta wasn't just a rap city anymore, it was a capital of hip-hop culture. Even his deep cuts had power. The Potion, produced by Timbaland, was one of those tracks that blended club energy with lyrical precision, a combination few could pull off like Ludacris could. Behind the humor was hard work. Ludacris' professionalism was legendary. He'll show up early, nail verses in one take, and still find time to push his label DTP forward. With DTP, he helped other artists break through. Chingy's Right There, Sean is getting some, Bobby's Valentino Slowed Down. He wasn't just making hits, he was creating a dynasty. In 2004, Shawnna released her debut album, Worth the Wait, which was supported by 2 singles, Shake That Shit and Wait a Minute. The album debuted at number 22 on the US Billboard 200 and sold over 380,000 copies in the US alone. In that same year, I-20 released his debut album as well. In 2005, Bobby Valentino released his debut self-titled album, Bobby Valentino, on April 26, 2005. The album was a commercial success, debuted at number 3 on the US Billboard 200 and at number 1 on the top R&B hip-hop albums chart. The album had hits like Slow Down and Tell Me, pushing the album to gold status. And by 2005, Ludacris had done it all. Platinum plaques, chart-topping singles, iconic videos, and even a growing reputation as a businessman. But as his empire expanded, a new path began calling him, one that would test his versatility all over again. Hollywood was watching, and soon, Ludacris will make a move that will surprise the entire industry. His first major role came in 2003 when director John Singleton casted him in Too Fast, Too Furious as Taj Parker, a slick-talking mechanic and underground race host. John Single casted Ludacris because they failed to bring back Ja Rule for the sequel to The Fast and the Furious. And Ludacris slid into the role effortlessly. It wasn't a stretch. The charisma, confidence, and the humor that defined his music translated perfectly to the screen. The movie was a hit too, grossing over $236 million worldwide and introduced Ludacris to a new audience outside of hip-hop. But that was only the beginning. Just 2 years later, Ludacris would shock critics with a completely different kind of performance, one that proved he wasn't just there to have fun, but to act. In 2004's Crash, directed by Paul Higgins, Ludacris took on a serious, complex role as Anthony, a frustrated carjacker navigating racial tension in Los Angeles. Gone was comedic, animated Luda fans knew. In this place stood a reflective, conflicted man confronting the social realities of America. The film won the Academy Award for Best Picture in 2006, cementing Ludacris' place in Hollywood. For the first time, the same man known for outrageous music videos and punchline-heavy records was now part of an Oscar-winning assembly. He followed that up with Hustle and Flow the same year, a gritty, emotional story about a Memphis hustler chasing rap dreams. It was a film that mirrored the struggle he had overcome in real life. Playing Skinny Black, Ludacris tapped into the darker side of fame, the arrogance, the disconnection, the pride. His portrayal gave depth to the idea of success, showing that not every rapper's journey ends in humility. He knew both worlds, the grind and the glory. That's why Hustle and Flow felt authentic. Ludacris wasn't acting from imagination, he was acting from experience. What made Ludacris' transition to film so remarkable was his balance. While other rappers abandoned music once Hollywood called, he kept both careers alive. One year, he'll be starring in a blockbuster film. The next year, he'll be back in the booth dropping hits. Between 2007 and 2009, Luda was in various films and shows. But in 2011, Ludacris reprised his role as Taj Parker in Fast 5, now part of a global ensemble cast alongside Vin Diesel, The Rock, Paul Walker, and Tyrese Gibson. The franchise became one of the most highest grossing in history, and Taj became one of his most beloved characters. From 2013 to 2023, Luda was starring Fast and Furious 6, Furious 7, The Fate of the Furious, F9, and Fast X. Over the years, Ludacris brought a sense of levity and heart to the Fast and Furious universe. The same charisma that once lit up rap videos, now shining on cinema screens around the world. He will be a playable character in Def Jam Vendetta, Def Jam Fight for NY, Def Jam Fight for NY The Takeover, and Def Jam Icon. Outside of film, Ludacris also built a personal empire, launching the Ludacris Foundation to empower the youth through education and community outreach, investing in businesses, and becoming a husband and father and a citizen of Gabon. His life reflected growth from wild entertainer to mature artist and entrepreneur. As his acting career flourished, his music output began to slow down. By the late 2000s, Ludacris had released Release Therapy on September 26, 2006, and it debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 and sold 309,000 copies in its first week of release. Theater of the Mind released on November 21st, 2008. The album debuted at number 5 on the US Billboard 200 and sold 214,000 copies in the first week of release. And Battle of the Sexes, which released on March 9th, 2010, debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 and sold 137,000 copies in its first week of release. These are the albums that showcase an older, more reflective version of Ludacris. Runaway Love, which was the third single from Release Therapy, featured Mary J. Blige. The track revealed his social consciousness, a far cry from the party anthems on his early career. It was a sign of a growing artist, shifting focus and finding purpose beyond hits. Release Therapy earned him a Grammy for Best Rap Album, and the lead single Moneymaker won a Best Rap Song at the 49th Annual Grammy Awards, proving that even in evolution, he remained elite. By the 2010s, Ludacris has cemented his dual legacy, a rap icon and a respected actor. Few could balance both worlds so effortlessly, but as he transitioned deeper into film and business, fans began asking the same question: what happens when the microphone goes quiet? Every artist has a season, the rise, the reign, and the reckoning. For Ludacris, the 2000s were a decade of dominance, but by the early 2010s, the rap landscape had changed. New sounds were taking over. The mixtape era had evolved into the blog era, and a new generation with artists like Drake, J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, and Future began reshaping hip-hop's center of gravity. The southern energy that Ludacris helped popularize was still alive, but its expression has shifted. Less punchlines and party energy, more melody and introspection. For Ludacris, music never stopped being part of his identity, but the frequency had changed. The man who once dominated the mic was beginning to master another medium entirely. His acting career started as a side mission, a cameo here and there, a supporting role there, but soon it became a second empire. He didn't just survive Hollywood, he thrived in it. And as his rap peers struggled with aging out irrelevance, Ludacris adapted. He became a businessman, an actor, a brand, and most importantly, a family man. In 2015, he dropped Ludacris, a reflective, mature project that mixes trademark humor with a new perspective on fatherhood, fame, and legacy. It wasn't about chasing chart numbers anymore. It was about reminding the world that behind the actor and the mogul, there was still a lyricist capable of commanding any beat. Even years later, when he dropped short freestyles online, the wordplay, the timing, the voice, all still razor sharp. Ludacris hadn't lost it. He had simply redirected it. Ludacris' legacy isn't defined by a single hit or ever. It's the balance he mastered, humor and skill, hustle and heart. He proved he could still be lyrical without being too serious, fun without being foolish, and successful without losing himself. Today's generation of Southern artists, from Atlanta trap kings to comedic lyricists, owe a piece of their creative DNA to Ludacris. Ludacris made it okay to be loud, to be clever, to perform again. He turned charisma into currency, from a radio booth in Atlanta to global superstardom. Ludacris built his empire with nothing but a voice, a vision, and a relentless sense of humor. He outlasted trends, crossed industries, and never once lost sight of where he came from. In the end, Ludacris wasn't just a rapper from the South. He was one of the architects of the 2000s hip-hop culture. His flow, his videos, his presence, they changed how we viewed Southern rap. And while the world keeps evolving, his story remains proof that talent, timing, and tenacity can make you ludicrously legendary.